Number 5. The Octavius. The Octavius became more than just a legend in 1775 when a whaling ship named the Herald found it aimlessly drifting off the coast of Greenland. The scary part? With all of its crew frozen dead by the Arctic cold's mist and winds. To add to the spookiness, the ship's captain was even found sitting at his desk with a logbook in front of him, finishing a log entry from 1762. The Octavius was a legendary 18th century ghost ship. According to the story, the 3-masted schooner was found west of Greenland, boarded as a derelict. The 5-man boarding party found the entire crew of 28 below deck, completely frozen solid and almost perfectly preserved. The captain's body was supposedly slouched over the table in his cabin, pen in hand, with the captain's log in front of him. In his cabin, there were also the bodies of a woman and a boy covered with a blanket, and a sailor with a tinderbox in his hand trying to stay warm. The boarding party took only the captain's log before leaving the vessel, trying not to touch the remains or evidence of what possibly could have been the reason for the lost ship at sea. The last entry from the logbook was November 11th, 1762, which meant that the ship had been lost in the Arctic for 13 years. Can you imagine? 13 years of just traveling the Arctic, sailing slowly while frozen bodies lay still on board as a ghost ship? Yo, that's just like terrifying, okay? Like seeing a ghost ship sail up beside you from the fog, crystallized in frozen ice with the horrors that lay below the deck. Very sad, but also very scary, you know? Number 4, the SS Valencia. Side note, if you like what we do here, make sure you always Hulk smash that like button or throw a comment down below. It really helps the channel out. Let us know what other ghost ships you know of, and I'll check them out for a part 2 or maybe even a part 3. Speaking of more ghost ships, the SS Valencia is one of the creepier ship stories. Pulling up and finding a completely abandoned ship is scary enough. Those are people's lives lost. It's scary stuff. The SS Valencia was an American iron-hulled passenger steamer built for service in 1882 by William Cramp and Sons. It did many things. In 1897, the Valencia was attacked by a Spanish cruiser, Reina Mercedes, just off the Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. They tried to sink her, but nope. She was built strong, and she survived. A year later, she became a passenger liner for the US West Coast, where she served in the Spanish-American War as a troop ship during the conflict. Eventually, after her service, the Valencia was wrecked off of Cape Beale, the west coast of Vancouver Island, British Columbia, on January 22nd, 1906, as her sinking unfortunately took 100 passengers with her. Some classify the wreck of the Valencia as the worst maritime disaster in, quote, the graveyard of the Pacific, which is a famously known treacherous area off the southwest coast of Vancouver Island. That's a horrible nickname for a shallow area also, right? Like, the graveyard? That's horrible. 6 months after the sinking, a local fisherman and his wife reported seeing a lifeboat with 8 skeletons in a nearby sea cave at the shoreline of Pachena Bay. The cave was reported to be around 200 feet deep. There was no definite explanation for the lifeboat's presence in the cave, but due to the dangerous seas outside the cave's mouth, the lifeboat along with its human remains couldn't be recovered. Local fishermen similarly report lifeboats being rowed by skeletons of the Valencia's victims just offshore as well. Most famous sighting was a rescue ship named the Topeka. Some observers on board, who were survivors of the just sunken Valencia, claimed, while sailing home with the survivors, a ship approached from the fog, and the ship passing was the just sank Valencia. The crew on board apparently now all skeletons. Yo, I'm getting the Curse of the Black Pearl vibes right now, are you? Like, that's scary, scary.
Coming in at number 4, we've got the Copenhagen. 5 masts, and none of them prevented the ship from going ghost. You'd think it would be easier to spot that way, but hey, unlike our last ghostly tale, this ship was jam-packed with capable sailors. Well, partly anyway. The Copenhagen was known as a training ship, which would often take a fair number of cadets. They would learn how to best run the ship so that their subsequent journeys might go a little smoother. One would assume that a training ship wouldn't be subject to overly harsh conditions, just like how any training is supposed to lower the risk of failure during a real-life scenario. Unfortunately, this was not the case. 60 sailors marched aboard this well-fitted ship, and once they departed, they were never seen again. The ship had all anyone would need to succeed, including plenty of lifeboats, an auxiliary engine, and a wireless communication system. So, what went wrong? Nobody really knows. It left the Rio de la Plata on December 14th, heading to Australia. On the 21st, the crew was in touch with another ship and all seemed to be well. After that though, they went totally silent. Some think they ran into an iceberg, others claim that it could have been something more sinister. Either way, darkness and fog definitely played into the equation. For years, the Copenhagen was missing in action with nothing to show for it. However, some sailors did claim to see a phantom ship with 5 masts sailing the seas. Now, the ghost crew hasn't attempted to communicate with anybody yet, nor has anybody been able to get close enough to confirm what they've seen. But you'd better believe those cadets are seasoned sailors by now. Back in 2012, a wreck was discovered that many believe to be the Copenhagen. However, this still goes unconfirmed. Coming in at number 3, we've got the tale of the Jenny. Now, the tales I've told up until this point have been mysterious indeed. The fates of the folks on board are up in the air and may never be fully explained. The story of the Jenny is just as mysterious, especially because it's been contested by a few folks, but the fate of the crew, if you believe the story, is more cut and dry, or should I say, frozen and wet. In this unsubstantiated story of oceanic horror, the crew of a ship named Hope came across what appeared to be a ship in pretty good shape. From a distance, there appeared to be crew members working on the deck. This struck the crew of the Hope as a little strange, as the Jenny had been missing for many years. When they got closer, it all started making sense though. The men they had seen atop the ship were indeed still there, but not alive. Each one was frozen solid, met with a frigid end. Yikes. Things got worse when the captain of the Hope decided to check out the inside of the ship, where he found more frozen corpses. The Jenny's captain was discovered frozen to a chair with a journal nearby. The final entry in his log read, "No food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive." That one sentence carries all sorts of latent horror, with images of more than 2 months without food in a horrible frozen environment. One has to wonder if any crewmates became food for the survivors, and what life must have been like as Hope faded by the day. Coming in number 2, we've got the Baron Falkenberg. Here's a general rule for life: don't kill your brother and his bride. If you can't abide by that, maybe you deserve to be carted out to a ghost ship and doomed to roam the waters until time immemorial. The good Baron was unable to follow this seemingly simple rule and ended up in a less than savory position. The story goes like this. One day, after being missing for quite a while, Baron Falkenberg's brother returned home. Folks were quite pleased with his return, and the brother proposed marriage to a lovely young maiden the Baron himself was interested in. At their wedding feast, the Baron lost his temper and cracked his sibling over the head with a bottle, killing him. The bride-to-be was terrified and ran off, but the Baron pursued her to confess his love. This didn't go over very well, and the woman told the Baron that she'd rather be dead than be with him. A very literal man, the Baron interpreted this dramatic retort as a request, and he stabbed her. Realizing the grave mistake he'd made, the Baron fled to the beach, where he found a man with a dinghy waiting. This man told the Baron that the captain was waiting for him and rowed out to a much larger ship off the shore. From there, the Baron boarded the ship, and for the past half a millennium, he's remained on board. This ship always seems to be heading north, flickering with blue flame and filled with skeletal sailors. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Palatine. Forget the Block Island sound, we're talking about the Block Island light. If you ever find yourself around Rhode Island between Christmas and New Year's, take a look across the water at night. It's said you might see an old ship blazing against the darkness. There are many stories about where this ship came from, and none have been officially confirmed. Some say that the crew had come down with a terrible illness and the captain would not let them go to shore. Others say that folks from Rhode Island lured the ship to the shoals in order to take what they could from it, killing the remaining passengers. And then there's the alternate version where the locals actually rescued the folks on board and nursed them back to health. So why is the ship on fire in the ghostly apparitions then? Well, apparently a woman was left on the island by the ship and eventually came to be known as a witch. She got her revenge on the vessel by imagining it on fire and cursing it for leaving her alone. This idea became more popular, and now the story involves a flaming ship.
Kicking off at number 5. 5. The Kaz II, which perhaps is one of the most terrifying modern instances of the term ghost ship and one of the most profoundly tragic unsolved mysteries of the deep blue sea. The Kaz II, which was publicly dubbed the Ghost Yacht, was a 9.8 meter catamaran which was found drifting listlessly 88 nautical miles off the northeastern coast of Australia on the 20th of April 2007. The 3 men aboard, who were all residents of Perth in Western Australia, were all incredibly experienced sailors. They were 56-year-old Derek Batten and brothers Peter Tunstall and James Tunstall, who were 69 and 63 respectively. Their whereabouts still remains a mystery to this day, and the fate of these 3 men perhaps may never be known. What made it even stranger is that when the Kaz II was eventually found by the Coast Guard, there were no signs of distress, no signs of boat damage, or even a struggle between the 3 men. It was as if they just vanished out of thin air. Coffee cups were left out and all the life jackets on board remained stowed away, indicating that the trio never felt at risk. In an even more curious turn of events, rescue teams discovered video footage of the 3 men on a handheld camera, seemingly hours before they disappeared. It showed them fishing, relaxing in the sun with the motor off, and offered no clues as to how these 3 experienced sailors disappeared at sea. Although an inquiry was later drawn, no definitive conclusions were ever reached, and only theories remain about the ultimate fate of the Kaz II.
Number 3. The Mary Celeste. We've heard about her. One of the most famous real-life ghost ships, of course, is the mystery of the Mary Celeste. And I say mystery because it's still a mystery. She was found drifting slowly through the waters of the Atlantic Ocean in 1872, sailing completely unharmed and untouched with all its sails still up, the crew's personal belongings intact, and a cargo of more than 1,700 barrels of booze untouched. She set sail from New York City with more than 1,700 full barrels of alcohol destined for Italy for distribution. On board were 10 people, including Captain Briggs, his wife, and their daughter. Over the next 2 weeks, the ship encountered, well, something bizarre. 10 days later, the vessel was spotted by a British brig, De Gratia. The crew from that ship boarded the Mary Celeste and discovered it deserted. Yeah, no crew. Spooky. First thing I'm thinking is Bermuda Triangle. Always, always, always. Ghost ships, anything lost at sea, Bermuda Triangle, immediately. But apparently a British ship found the Mary Celeste on December 4th, 1872 near the Strait of Gibraltar. Sorry, so not the Bermuda Triangle then? No? Alright. Yeah, it couldn't have been pirates either, because apparently they like to drink stuff. It was apparently late reaching Italy, and this British ship went out looking for her, confused where she had gotten lost. The strangeness comes with the boarding. Below deck, things looked completely normal. Absolutely no signs of attack or struggle. The only things missing were 1 lifeboat and the captain's logbook, and most importantly, the entire crew. Theories of crew mutiny, weather phenomenons like giant water spouts, or even consumption of poisonous foods came into play. After passing Santa Maria Island, the Azores, on November 25th, 1872, there were no more entries. Devoid of all crew, but strangely stocked to the nines with food and booze and all the crew's personal belongings like jewelry and clothes. With no clear explanation, the Mary Celeste remains one of the most puzzling ghost ships around. They still have no idea what happened to those people. After the salvage hearings, Mary Celeste continued in service under new owners, but in 1885, her captain deliberately wrecked her off the coast of Haiti as part of an attempted insurance fraud. Number 2. Lady Lovibond. A ghostly story of lust, love, jealousy, and rage. The dark history of this haunted love boat. In 1748, the day before Valentine's Day, it was set to sail as a celebration of the ship's captain's wedding. On February 13th, 1748, the ship contained by the newly married Simon Peel was carrying his new wife Annetta and their wedding guests from London to Oporto, Portugal. Unknown to the captain, his first mate Rivers was also in love with Annetta, and in a fit of insane jealousy, seized the helm after murdering the helmsman and deliberately steered the ship towards the Goodwin Sands, where it ran aground, cracking the ship in half and unfortunately drowning everybody on board. And there, the story might have ended, had it not been witnessed for all the claims to have seen the ghostly ship appear every 50 years. Some of them even passing close enough to hear the sounds of celebration. Apparently on the 13th of February, the Eden Bridge spots Lady Lovibond's ship exactly 50 years later. It was reported seen by ship captain James Westlake, and according to his testimony, he almost collided with the ship before he could finally turn the steering wheel to avoid the collision. Dude, close call, just shows up out of nowhere? Like, what? He also recorded in his logbook the ship was headed straight for the Goodwin Sands. Other sightings have been reported at 50-year intervals, except for 1984, when the ship failed to materialize. 1798, 1848, 1898 and 1948 witnessed this ship's sightseeings. Even some boats sent out rescuers, assuming that it was in distress or lost at sea, but later it could never be found. Yo, a tale as old as time, huh? Jealousy, that'll do it. Yep, always does. And number 1, the Flying Dutchman. In all maritime folklore, this ghost ship has left quite an impact like no other. It's the ghost ship, the oldest one in the book. Well, maybe not the oldest, but definitely the most prolific and well known. The Pirates of the Caribbean, the Dead Man's Chest, is literally the story of this. The legend, Vanderdecken, the captain, is on his way towards the East Indies with a confidence and determination. He tried to steer his ship through the horrid weather conditions of the Cape of the Good Hope, but failed miserably. Even after, of course, vowing to drift until his own demise, you see, he apparently signed a little deal with you-know-who. He swore that he would succeed through the perils of waves even if he had to sail until his judgment day. The devil apparently heard his oath and took him up on it, and now the Dutchman is condemned to stay at sea forever. Legend says that since then, they have been cursed to sail the oceans for eternity. To this day, hundreds of fishermen and sailors from the deep sea have claimed to have even witnessed the Flying Dutchman, continuing its never-ending voyage across never-ending waters. The most famous sightings, I would say, is that of Prince George V of Wales. He was on a 3-year voyage in 1880 with his older brother Prince Albert of Wales and their tutor. The prince's log records say the following for the pre-dawn hours of July 11, 1881 near Australia. Quote, 4 a.m. The Flying Dutchman crossed our bows. A strange red light as a phantom ship glow, which lights the masts, spars, and sails of a brig 200 yards distant as she came up on the port bow, but on arriving there was no vestige or nor any sign whatever of a material ship. Seen right away to the horizon, 13 persons altogether saw her. That's a prince writing, so yeah, that's pretty good source material, I'd say. This is horrific. Imagine a ghost ship faded by red light pulling up towards your ship in the middle of the night, then just cruises on by. Yeah, that'd be the end of me, for sure.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the Mary Celeste. Don't be tricked by the lovely name, this ship is no fair maiden. Maybe it was named for one, but that's got nothing to do with their ghostly tale. This tale is a tragic one indeed, and one that seems ridiculously risky by today's standards. A captain decided he wanted to make the trip from New York to Italy aboard his ship, the Mary Celeste. Had he decided to bring a super experienced crew and a bunch of cargo, that would be one thing, but this nautical journey was no such business trip. Instead, he decided to bring his wife, 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7. That's a small group of people for such an extensive journey, especially when bringing one's family along. But everyone boarded the ship regardless and headed out to sea. Their journey should have been about a month, but they never arrived in Italy. Instead, another ship known as the Dei Gratia came across the Mary Celeste, floating aimlessly in the sea. Assuming the worst, the crew of this new ship went to see if anyone was still aboard. But they were never able to help anyone as the ship turned out to be empty. But it wasn't totally gutted though. There were still plenty of supplies in the larder, and the ship itself was still in pretty good shape. Sure, there was a bunch of water on the deck, but it wasn't like it was gonna sink anytime soon. Stranger still, the lifeboat was gone with no indication as to why or where it was heading. So there the Mary Celeste was, without a captain, crew, or family, drifting in the Atlantic. It became one of the most famous ghost ships of its era too, as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle drew inspiration from it, and used this inspiration to write his short story, J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. This tale was a launching board for many theories, from pirates to mutiny to cold-blooded murder. The thing is, nobody knows for sure what actually happened. The captain, his crew, and his family were never heard from again. Now, there are some more realistic theories that have come forth about the inexperienced captain not knowing the full extent of damage to his ship and ordering everyone maybe prematurely onto a lifeboat at the first sight of land. Even so, that likely ended in tragedy as well, as the lifeboat never made it to shore, or so we think. And with all those supplies still on board and the ship not going down anytime soon, it feels a bit like an ironic tragedy now, doesn't it?
Coming in at number 4, the Lady Lovibond. Of course, no list would be complete without a good old sea shanty of jilted lovers and ghostly revenge. As the legend goes, the Lady Lovibond was a schooner that is alleged to have been wrecked on the Goodwin Sands just off the southern coast of Kent on the 13th of February 1749. But if you ask any old sailor worth their salt, they'll tell you that it just so happens to have a habit of reappearing every 50 or so years as a ghost ship. As the story goes, the captain of the ship, a man named Simon Reed, had just been married to his bride Annetta and was celebrating the joyous occasion with a cruise bound for Oporto in Portugal. Now, it is high time to mention that a long-standing sailor's superstition was that back in the day, it was grave bad luck to bring a woman on board, and in many ways, the legend of the Lady Lovibond is a cautionary tale that exemplifies that fact. According to the tale, the ship's first mate, a man named John Rivers, was a rival for the hand of the captain's young wife, and in a jealous fit of rage, he killed the crewman manning the ship's wheel and steered the vessel into the treacherous Goodwin Sands, killing absolutely everyone on board. And if you're asking me, that is a stark overreaction. But nevertheless, since that fateful day in 1749, the Lady Lovibond has been sighted on numerous occasions with an ethereal, ghostly glow, eternally bound to wander the ocean. Next up at number 3, the Mary Celeste, which in fact may very well be the world's most infamous ghost ship, as well as one of the longest enduring mysteries of the Seven Seas. Built in Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia in 1861 and launched under the new name of the Mary Celeste in 1868, this merchant brigantine sailed uneventfully across the Atlantic for years as a seaworthy, efficient vessel. It wasn't until her fateful voyage in 1872 where the true ghostly legend began, which has since gathered theories that vary from submarine earthquakes, water spouts, an attack by a giant squid, and even paranormal intervention. No one will truly know the ultimate fate of the Mary Celeste, with every single soul on board never being seen or heard from again, which is a terrifying thought in itself, isn't it? The Mary Celeste was discovered adrift and deserted just off the coast of the Azores Islands on December 5th, 1872. It was a Canadian vessel, the De Gratia, which found her in a disheveled but seaworthy condition under partial sail and with one lifeboat missing. The last entry in the ship's log was dated 10 days earlier, which detailed the vessel's last known location, before these mysterious, infamous events unfolded. On board was the ship's captain, Benjamin S. Briggs, his wife Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 8 seasoned crew members, all veterans of the sea. It poses the question, what dire threat did the Mary Celeste face that caused a highly experienced captain to abandon his ship? Nothing was stolen, all of the crew's possessions and cargo were exactly as they'd left them, but in all likelihood, we may never know. Swinging in at number 2, the Flying Dutchman. Of course, this legendary vessel couldn't not make this list. The ghost ship that can tragically never make port, doomed to navigate the perilous ocean for eternity. In actual fact though, the Flying Dutchman has had such an impact on nautical culture that it's easy to overlook the treacherous tale of its origin. It is thought that the legend of the Flying Dutchman first originated from the 17th century golden age of the Dutch East India Trade Company, a mega corporation that had a stranglehold monopoly on the Dutch spice trade that ran throughout the 16 and 1700s, where tale was told of a Dutch man of war that was lost just off the Cape of Good Hope. Purportedly, every soul on board perished after being ravaged by a violent tempest. The following few days, numerous other trading ships reported seeing a ghostly, ethereal vessel out in the foggy mist of the ocean, flying the exact same colours as the Dutch vessel. Since then, the Flying Dutchman has gathered notoriety as the worst omen you could ever hope for of a phantom ship that heralds the demise of an entire crew, with sightings continuing all the way into the 19th and 20th centuries. In fact, perhaps the most recognised sighting was by King George V himself during a 3-year voyage in 1881 just off the coast of Australia. He noted in his personal log that 13 people had seen the same glowing Flying Dutchman in the early hours of the morning, and later in the day, the ordinary crewman who had spotted the vessel fell from the foremast and, in his words, was smashed to atoms. It's a little bit worrying, that one, eh? And finally, our number 1 spot, the Ourang Medan. And where do we even begin with the bizarre, perplexing legend of the Ourang Medan, perhaps the most terrifyingly unexplainable instances of a ghostly shipwreck in history? But, well, the leading physical theory of the Ourang Medan may be even more horrifying than it first appears. As the legend goes, at some time in June 1947, an American vessel by the name of the Silver Star picked up several distress calls from a nearby Dutch merchant ship, the Ourang Medan. A radio operator aboard the troubled vessel sent a message in Morse code. In rushed, confused confused dots and dashes, it read, "We float. All officers including the captain dead in chart room and on the bridge. Probably whole of crew dead." And then a few moments later, after even more confused dots and frantic dashes, two words came through very clearly. "I die." Then silence. Nothing more was heard of them. But well, when the Silver Star eventually located and boarded the apparently undamaged and otherwise seaworthy Ourang Medan, what they found absolutely horrified them. Every single person aboard was found dead, sprawled on their backs, frozen in fear with their mouths gaping open and their eyes staring straight ahead. There were no survivors, but even more terrifying, apparently no signs of injury or foul play. Just as the Silver Star crew was preparing to tow the ship to a nearby port, a fire broke out in the Ourang Medan, which shortly exploded before finally sinking into the depths. Since this horrifying incident, theories have ranged from the vessel carrying a highly dangerous chemical nerve agent to an entanglement with the CIA after the result of a secret experiment to an unprovoked alien assault. But if you haven't already sensed a theme with this particular list, it seems that we may never know.